April 1865. A small house in Appomattox, Virginia. Two generals sit across from each other, exhausted, silent. For 4 years, the United States has been torn apart by war. Brother against brother, a nation divided. In our timeline, this is the moment the Confederacy surrenders. But history is not always inevitable, because just a few years earlier, things could have gone very differently. To understand how the Confederacy could have won, we first need to understand what really happened. This is the real story of the American Civil War, the causes, the turning points, and the moment everything changed. By 1860, the United States was no longer truly united. The North and the South had grown into two very different societies. In the North, industry was rapidly expanding. Factories, railroads, and cities were transforming the economy. In the South, life remained largely agricultural, built around vast plantations. And at the center of that system was slavery. Millions of enslaved African Americans were forced to work the land, producing cotton, one of the most valuable commodities in the world. For the Southern elite, slavery was not just a labor system, it was the foundation of their wealth and their entire social order. But in the North, opposition to slavery was growing. Many believed it should not expand into new Western territories. Others demanded its complete abolition. Over decades, political compromises tried to hold the country together, but each one only delayed the inevitable. Tensions escalated in places like Kansas, where pro-slavery and anti-slavery settlers clashed in violent conflict. By the late 1850s, many Southerners no longer saw the North as a partner, but a direct threat to their way of life. That fear reached its peak in November 1860, when Abraham Lincoln was elected President of the United States. Lincoln opposed the expansion of slavery. To the South, that was enough. They believed their future was now in danger. On December 20th, 1861, South Carolina became the first state to leave the Union. It was soon followed by 11 others. Together, they formed a new nation.
The fall of Vicksburg on July 4, 1863, marked a turning point. The Union now controlled the entire river.
The enemy's flank is exposed here, near the high ground. General Longstreet must press the attack immediately.
The Confederate States of America. Their goal was simple: independence. In February 1861, a new government was established, and tensions quickly turned into open conflict. On April 12, 1861, Confederate forces opened fire on Fort Sumter. The Civil War had begun. What many expected to be a short conflict would become the deadliest war in American history.
By 1863, the blockade had crippled the South. Rations were scarce, and the populace faced severe hardship.
In the early stages of the war, the Confederacy performed better than many expected. At the First Battle of Bull Run in July 1861, Union forces were driven into retreat. Southern generals quickly gained a reputation for skill and aggression. Among them was Stonewall Jackson, whose determination in battle made him a legend. And in 1862, command of the main Confederate Army fell to Robert E. Lee. Under Lee's leadership, the Army of Northern Virginia achieved a series of impressive victories. Despite having fewer men, fewer resources, and weaker industry, the South proved something critical. It could fight, and it could win, and for a moment it seemed like independence might actually be possible. But the Confederacy faced a problem it could not ignore. The North had more people, more factories, more weapons. Over time, those advantages began to matter. In September 1862, Confederate forces met the Union Army at the Battle of Antietam. It became the bloodiest single day in American history. Although the battle was not a clear victory for the Union, it forced Lee to retreat, and that gave Lincoln the opportunity. Shortly after, he issued the Emancipation Proclamation. The war was no longer just about preserving the Union. It was now also about ending slavery. This changed everything. It made it far more difficult for European powers to support the Confederacy.
Look at the names. We must support the Union, sir.
Support this bloody war. It is tyranny. I say let the South go.
How dare you?
Together, we must restore this Union. Let us stand united in this most important hour.
The news from the front is dire. We must act now. Mr. President, consider the logistical challenges. We have no choice. We must reinforce immediately.
And it strengthened Northern resolve. In the summer of 1863, the war reached its most critical moment. General Lee led his army north into Pennsylvania. His goal was clear: win a decisive victory on Union soil and force the North to consider peace. What followed was the Battle of Gettysburg. For 3 days, tens of thousands of soldiers fought in brutal combat. On July 3rd, Lee made a bold and risky decision, a massive frontal assault known as Pickett's Charge. It failed. The Confederate Army was forced to retreat, and with that, the South lost its best chance to win the war.
But history is not fixed. The outcome of the Civil War was not guaranteed. In fact, there were moments.
Sherman is here. If we lose Atlanta, the supply lines are cut.
The reports confirm it, General. We can no longer finance the war. The treasury is empty.
And if the Confederacy holds this line, the outcome shifts dramatically.
Are these new reports from Paris confirmed by your London sources?
Where just one different decision could have changed everything. And no moment was more important than Gettysburg. In our timeline, General Lee chose a direct assault on the Union center, Pickett's Charge. It was bold, but it was a mistake. But what if Lee made a different decision? What if he avoided a full frontal attack and instead maneuvered his army, forcing the Union to reposition? The result would not need to be a total victory. Only one thing matters. The Confederate Army does not suffer a devastating defeat. It remains intact. The war continues, and the South still has hope. Without the crushing defeat at Gettysburg, the war takes a different path. The Union still holds advantages: more men, more industry, more resources. But the Confederacy is not broken. In the West, the situation remains difficult. But without the psychological blow of Gettysburg, Southern morale holds longer. The war drags on into 1864, and that changes everything.
Your blockade was an act of war, sir. We will not forget the disruption to our mills.
The Confederacy is dead, Baron.
This cotton is damp. We must renegotiate the unit price listed here.
The contract is binding, Master Davies. The ledger shows the agreed rate.
Casualties continue to rise. Entire cities feel the cost of war. Families lose sons, fathers,
When the signal
brothers.
fires, we head straight for the overseer's house. Freedom is waiting.
In the North, support for the war begins to weaken. Not everyone believes the Union is worth endless bloodshed. In 1864, the future of the war may no longer depend only on the battlefield, but on politics. President Abraham Lincoln faces re-election. His opponent, former Union General George McClellan, is far more open to negotiation. In our timeline, Union victories, including the capture of Atlanta, restored public confidence. Lincoln won. The war continued, and the Confederacy collapsed.
This map represents the sacrifices made to preserve the Union. We will not yield on this point.
But in this timeline, things are different. Without a decisive turning point in 1863, and without major victories in 1864, the Northern public begins to question the war itself. The question becomes simple: how much longer should this continue? Under growing pressure, the United States moves toward negotiation. The goal is no longer total victory, but ending the war. And that leads to the one outcome the Confederacy has been fighting for from the beginning: recognition. Not conquest, not domination, but independence. The Confederate States of America becomes a separate nation. The United States remains intact, but divided. The war ends, not with total defeat, but with a fragile peace. But victory does not solve the Confederacy's problems. In many ways, it only begins them. The Southern economy still depends heavily on agriculture and on slavery. Unlike the North, the Confederacy has not industrialized at the same pace, and the world is changing. Across Europe, slavery has already been abolished. That leaves the Confederacy isolated, politically, economically, and morally. International pressure begins to grow. Trade becomes more complicated. And inside the Confederacy, tensions continue to rise. A large enslaved population, a fragile economy, and a political system built on control. This is not stability. It is pressure, building over time. The consequences go far beyond the South. North America is now divided into two
Your Honor,
rival
these documents
nations.
clearly establish the defendant's intent.
The court has reviewed the evidence. We find in favor of the plaintiff. Case dismissed.
Hold fast to the promises, brothers and sisters. Though the night is long, joy comes in the morning. Keep the faith.
By the left flank.
The United States and the Confederacy share a border, but not a future. Tensions remain high. Conflicts over territory, trade, and expansion are almost inevitable.
They thought they could break our spirit, but the Confederacy endures.
We will rise again.
Without a unified United States, the balance of global power shifts. American influence is weaker. Europe remains dominant longer. And the 20th century unfolds in a very different way. In our world, the Confederacy lost the Civil War. But that outcome was not inevitable. A different decision at the right moment could have changed everything.
Your behavior at the church today, Thomas, was unbecoming of this family. We must maintain appearances.
But even in victory, the Confederacy would have faced a future filled with uncertainty, conflict, and difficult choices. Because winning a war is not the same as winning the future.
Pay close attention to the examples on the board. These lessons are the foundation of your future.
All right, clear the road.
Giddy up now.
We must recognize the Confederacy as a sovereign nation.
They are traitors, sir, and we will not negotiate with traitors.
Order in the chamber.